Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we've attended some great meetings lately. Hear from Ben and Lynn about a soil clinic by AgPHD. Joe and Turk attended the Land Investment Expo put on by People's Company. Hear their takeaways on several topics from the speakers such as Jimmy John and Peter Zeihan. Turk summarizes a new USDA report that came out this week.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Turk, and we had a lot of meetings last week. Ben, you and Lynn attended one. Turk and I attended another. So let's start with Ben and Lynn.
We sat in on a 2-day soils clinic that basically starts from the very simplistic version of how to read a soil test and then worked through goals where each one of these soil tests where farmers should be shooting for to achieve maximum yields. So it was a nice refresher, being able to go back and look at some of the goals for where we want our phosphorus and potassium, as well as some of the micros that have a tendency to get swept under the bridge. And it's very unique because we got to sit and listen to Iowa State's talk, and there's always a fertilizer talk when we are at the Crop Advantage series, and then you get to mirror that against something that's more industry focused and maybe a little bit further out there where they may not be able to recreate some of these things in industry, but some of these guys that are achieving really, really high yield goals are shooting for certain target goals with their nutrient levels in the soil. So that's kind of the broad overview. It was a clinic put on by the Hefty brothers at AgPHD, and I always find it really interesting to be able to mirror the two different oppositions. And so it was a good meeting. Lynn, what were some of your main takeaways, and I'll fill in.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting how they've taken a dive into looking not so much at just our parts per million on a soil test, but actually looking at the ratios of say phosphorus to zinc and how that helps the plant have certain things more available to them, and how that then at the end of the day equates to yield. And I think that's something that is very important to all this, is that we can spend money and we can do stuff, but it has to return, and how does that equate to yield? So the phosphorus to zinc one was one that stood out to me. I think that one actually kind of goes a little bit further, the Antonio's at the Crop Advantage. I think that's something that I'd really like to see the university maybe take a step forward on that and start looking at some of these ratios, not just at P and K by themselves, but how does that play with some of our micros? And I think that's an evolution that they'll get to, because what they're finding is, even on, say, like a Midwest Labs test, their phosphorus levels are very high, but they're balancing back to the zinc and having extremely high, crop performance. And that's equating to something that maybe the university hasn't quite shown, that, their curve showed after you get to the very high levels, you're not really getting an economic gain from more application of phosphorus, where they're showing that in just a little bit different setting. So going a little bit further into that, and the part that I found really interesting with all of it was that the principle is similar but not the same for every soil type. Different ratios work in different environments based on your rainfall, based on your soil type. So it's a very unique situation that I definitely could see academia having trouble putting this into their small replicated trials because of variances and whatnot that might not show up in a small trial, where in a field setting, they're looking at 1 acre grids and then correlating it back to yield points, and then being able to come up with a lot of data, essentially. But I think it's definitely a very good framework for from a fertilizer standpoint on as we look to stuff. Right now the talk is cutting back, but really what they were showing is we can maybe redistribute our money, but don't necessarily cut back on fertilizer, because we could do things just a little bit different, and maybe go from 185 to 200, 200 to 225, and have a positive return on that.
Correct.
Basically allocate your dollars to where it's needed, rather than spend the same amount of dollars, but do it more wisely.
Correct. And if you have the situation where you have been building your P and K over long periods of time where you have that adequate level, the number that they're shooting for is 4 to 5% base saturation K. if you are already at those levels and you've achieved those levels, or you are at that 100 parts per million phosphorus level because your grandfather and your father have taken really good care of your land, or you're using manure, okay, once we get to this point, okay, now let's start looking at that bottom line of the Midwest Labs test, and let's see where, like you said, the phosphorus to zinc ratio, they're talking anywhere from 10 to 1, 8 to 1, 5 to 1 is what they want that phosphorus zinc ratio to be. Having adequate levels of copper. This system is kind of built on the Albrecht method that we've talked about in the past, that Neil Kinsey's famous for talking about. But if we have any growers out there or people that are listening, if you fight and struggle with sudden death, they say if you have 5% copper parts per million, if you have 5 parts per million copper in your soil test, they've seen in anecdotal evidence where the sudden death problems go away. They've also seen where you have high enough levels of copper in the soil that seed splits stop going away. So if you're a seed producer and you're looking to make the hull of that seed more indestructible from mechanical damage, having the right micros and the right balance is something that you should probably be looking at to firm the edge of the seed up. And there's just so much in the fertility world that we don't know about, or that has been lost since Dr. Albrecht's day, that it's just a really, really good reminder. And we can kind of go through at the end of, I'll put an attachment on what the common steps that each one of the goals that they're shooting for. And if you have any questions on what to do with that information, if you have your own soil test, I'd be happy to briefly run through that with any of our growers.
Pretty exciting stuff, because it's all about fine tuning and maximizing yield. So, anything else from you from that?
I don't think so.
Okay. The other thing, Turk and I attended, as well as some of the other folks in our office, was the Land Investment Expo put on by Steve Brewer's People's Company, land management and auction sales, and one of the biggest ones in the state of Iowa. It's a very prestigious meeting. I think almost 1,600 people either attended in person or online, and great number of speakers. And Turk, do you have any key points that you'd like to point out from some of the speakers? I mean, let's just, the speaker lineup was Peter Zeihan, which you can go on YouTube and follow him. They had Jimmy Johns, the sandwich guy, and his story of success, which basically shows that, the hard work ethic and the American dream still alive. Great story, how he got to where he was, and he's now a billionaire, and making sandwiches. And also they had speakers on interest rates and just in general, some political views and what's going on in this country. Just a extremely well done conference, and on top of it, you can do it by Zoom, so you don't even have to drive to Des Moines. So, Turk, what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, the interest rate thing was very interesting to me. As we're seeing interest rates going up, and hopefully the release this week of the rate of inflation going down for the fourth month in a row will hopefully have the Fed's backing off of interest rate increases. But I thought the speaker was very interesting in talking about the fact that by the end of next year we could see inflation back down to 2%, which is the goal, and then that'll definitely put pressure, or we'll see interest rates start falling again. So historically, the interest rate right now is still not very high compared to what it has been in past recessions and past experiences when we have a bad economy for a while. Still.
Yes, if the Fed manages this correctly, we could have that soft landing. But if they keep their foot on the gas and keep jacking the interest rates up, we could push us into a very serious recession. But they're pretty confident that they're going to back down and then ease up, and we'll bring this thing under control. So we got to watch that, because interest rates are important to farmers and, well, the average homeowner too, for that matter.
Yep. So it was that was probably the speaker that I took the most away from, as far as the the effects that we're going to be looking at in this next year. Jimmy Johns was a very entertaining speaker, and one of the things that I was taken back by is how he invested in people, and when he took his people through training, he actually sent them to the dentist so that they improved their smile, so that they had confidence, and because confidence is what sells.
And it was at his expense too.
Yeah, it was at his expense, that's right.
And that training center's in Champaign, Illinois, so it's literally right in our backyard. So great story, interesting guy for sure.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube and check him out too.
Well, one of the things that I was really impressed with was Frank Lutz. He's a pollster, and I thought this is one of the things that he found out, like if you're raising a family, the age 9 to 18, critical time in the formation of that young person. Number one, he asked the question, how often do you share as a family dinner? He said, you've got to do it 5 nights a week. 5 nights a week is critical because it does so many things for the family. He said he recommends, number 2, that you attend some type of religious service because it shows that there's a higher value in life. And he recommends at that age that you check the homework of your children at least 4 nights a week. Doing that is critical to understand that education is important. And he recommends that you take a vacation, a trip that is at least a week long, not a weekend thing or anything, but something that's a week long, and you push aside the cell phones and all that stuff and focus on being together and enjoying yourself. And number 5 was tell the truth. You've got to teach your kids to tell the truth and check it, demand it. And honesty is extremely critical in a family unit. And then recommends children play team sports because it does so many good things. You're working together in the higher purpose of that. And he says you need to grade yourself. If you're doing 5 out of 6 of these things, or 6 out of 6, you don't have to worry about your kids. They're going to be very well adjusted. They're going to be extremely successful in life. But if you're doing 2, 3, or less, he said you're endangering your children from being on the road to success. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, a pollster, and they're finding out about why is this child so well adjusted, why is this one such a problem child, and they brought it back down to these 6 things.
But I thought one of the most interesting things about those 6 things was the age that it was so critical. Most of the time we think about the impressionable years to being much younger than that, and that's critical too. But this went a lot older than I anticipated.
Yeah, it was extremely interesting, and as far as the politics go. It was kind of interesting. They polled the audience about the different potential presidential candidates, and contrary to what some people think, the Republican side of the room did not want Trump, which it was the governor of Florida, and he was preferred by a huge amount of applause differences. And anyhow, and he talked about there might be a third party, coming, because there's so much dissension and whatnot in the 2 existing parties that the potential exists that within the next 20 years, that 63% chance that we'll have a third party because of it. And anyhow, extremely good meeting. We couldn't possibly go through it all, but if you want to stretch your mind and look over the next couple hills, this is a very good meeting. Steve Brewer and company, they just do a great job in this area. So, Turk, you got something else to add that you'd like to add?
I wanted to talk about USDA reports that came out and this week, and kind of surprised the trade and re-energized the markets a little bit. And basically, the USDA lowered the corn production by a number that's the harvested acres by a number that's unheard of, and so that lowered supply. They increased the yield per acre by a bushel, but the reduced number of acres was shocked the trade, I guess. And so the same thing on soybeans as well, as they lowered the harvested acres and actually lowered the yield. So both supplies got tighter in this week's reports, which is the numbers that we will work with the rest of the year. This was the final changes until possibly next September. They could possibly change those numbers again. But the starting numbers are set for the year, and supplies got tighter, and which means that it's going to be supportive for prices long term. It really boils down to what kind of summer we're going to have. And of course, with La Nina trending toward a neutral phase, that leans toward more normal summer weather, spring and summer weather for the Midwest. And so we can still grow some big crops, I guess is what I'm saying. And opportunities probably won't stick around very long once we see them. Well, and I think the other thing, Turk, that plays into that is, we don't have a lot of snow cover in most of our trade area, which means typically we don't have a lot of snow cover. It means early spring. So I mean, if you don't have your seed lined up, you don't have it delivered, I'm urging you to get in gear, because will you be prepared for April planting? And so things are going to go fast potentially this spring. Now, it could change here in February and March, but I think you need to start focusing and being ready for an early spring. So maybe 2-3 weeks earlier than last year. Who knows? Anything else, Turk? Nope. 90 days we'll be in the field. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Anyhow, on the corny jokes, I want to kind of relate a little bit to my computer skills. When I went to college back at Quincy University, back then it was called Quincy College, the only people who had computers was like NASA, big corporations, and universities. I mean, nobody had access to a computer. So I had to learn my computer skills as time went on. So anyhow, the other day I was trying to buy a plane ticket online. Took for over an hour, but to no avail. The message kept asking, "Where do you want to go?" So I clicked on the icon that said home, and it made me start all over again. Yeah. Yep. And the other thing too is, I don't know if you know that, but everybody buys a lot of stuff online. Well, recently I started getting most of my clothes online. My neighbors now take their laundry in at night. Now, any of you don't know that back in the day, you used to have clotheslines, and some people still have clotheslines online. Okay. When you have to explain them, they're not too good, right? The last one that I'll trouble you with. I don't understand why my credit card keeps getting declined. I just don't understand. You try to use it, it gets declined. Every time I check my account online, it says I have an outstanding balance. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, there goes my computer skills, right? Yeah. Anyhow, I blame it that we just didn't grow up with computers. And young folks have a big advantage over us. So, anyhow, thanks for watching this week. But you want to watch next week, because we're going to feature one of our guests that we have on a regular basis, Joe Sinclair from Quality Ag. And also, we will have Carly Wilkins on, because they both attended the big meeting in Kansas City called FarmCon. So we're going to have a big discussion about FarmCon. It's also very focused on agriculture and some of the trends that the folks are seeing down there. So next week, Joe Sinclair and Carly Wilkins will join us for their discussion on FarmCon. In the meantime, I hope you and your family are safe and healthy, and we appreciate your business. We'll see you next week. Take care.